Welcome to the Insight podcast. My guest today is Dr. Caitlin Chasser. Caitlin is a GP, sleep consultant, and co-founder of The Sleep Project. We talk about what to do when you're stuck in a pattern of bad sleep, how to break the sleep stress cycle, quick wins for improving sleep, the role of supplements in sleep, and more. Enjoy the episode. So how did you sleep last night, Caitlin?
Well, that's an interesting question because normally I'm a great sleeper. And somehow I knew you were going to ask this question. And last night, and I'm not blaming you, Sam, but last night I slept really badly. And it was the first time for ages. And when I woke up this morning, I thought, oh, this is terrible. I'm going on to a podcast to talk about sleep. I'm a sleep expert. And he's going to ask me how my sleep was. And it was really bad last night. But actually, I think it's actually quite a good opportunity to talk about why my sleep was bad last night, because it's really relevant to lots of people. So the reason I got into being a sleep specialist from kind of the background of being a GP was actually I had a period of quite bad insomnia about 10 years ago, where I was really struggling with my sleep. And sort of the general sort of approach to sleep medicine in kind of general practice and medical school is pretty neglected, actually. I think we had one lecture which was on sleeping tablets and obstructive sleep apnea. And so actually the difficulties of sleep are generally not known about as a kind of core part of general practice or hospital medicine, except within the sleep clinics itself. And so I started this journey of discovery about how to fix my own sleep. And through that, actually discovered a huge amount of things that we can do to fix sleep. And that then has led to me doing the specialty I'm doing at the moment. And but because I've had sleep problems in the past, I'm always going to be a little bit more prone to having them in the future. And that's because there's some predisposing factors that make some people more vulnerable to it. So, for example, women are a little bit more at risk than men, actually quite a bit more at risk. People with mental health conditions, so anxiety or depression, people who've got caregiving duties, so for children or for parents or anyone else in the family, and someone who's had a sort of new diagnosis of any sort of illness, or also family history is really important. So there was a few things in my past that will always make me a little bit more prone. But then your question about I'm going to ask you tomorrow about your sleep, then focus my mind on sleep. And one of the things about good sleepers is they don't think about it. They just get into bed and they go to sleep, and it just happens, and it's kind of this natural process. But if you've ever had a period of insomnia, literally the only thing you can think about is sleep. And you wake up in the morning feeling tired and you're desperate to sleep. And then you spend all day thinking about how you're going to get some sleep. And then you get to bed and you're dreading going to sleep and the whole thing starting again. And then when you're lying awake at night, again, you're thinking about nothing but sleep. So as soon as that thought pops into your head to think about sleep, it actually can have a really detrimental effect on your sleep. And so you have to become like good sleepers and just not think about it. But that's a little bit more challenging. And then the other thing that happened is, it happens my husband is away at the moment. And so last night, he wasn't in the house. And normally he's got two big roles in the evening time. One, he locks up the house and makes sure everything's safe in the evening. And I'm a bit of a worrier. And so I was the person who did it. And then I was in bed thinking, have I locked everything up? Have I done it? And that's a big thing with people with insomnia. They tend to worry. And also, he's the person who tends to go to look after our kids if they wake up at the night, which is fantastic. He's absolutely brilliant at it. And it's actually a great tip for people who are having children who wake up. One of our baby sleep experts shared this. If you can get the man to go, or the partner who doesn't do as much of the caregiving, sometimes the expectations from the children are a little bit lower. And so they then go back to sleep a little bit quicker, because if it's mum, they want cuddles, they want someone to get into bed, they want them to sit with them until they go back to sleep. But if it's dad, they tend to be a little bit more sort of run through the functions. So he wasn't there. And so then I was listening out for the children and being a little bit more aware. And what these things do is they switch on the sort of stress part of our brain. And if we think about the stress part of our brain, it's the sort of sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight bit. And it's kind of designed by evolution to help us if we're fighting off a tiger or under attack. And obviously those are the bits of time when you really don't want to be asleep. And so by design, it works great. You're awake. But especially in kind of the modern world that we live in, our sympathetic nervous system can be switched on by lots of things, being kind of hyperstimulated by worries. And as soon as it does, it switches off that getting to sleep process. And the other thing it does, which I don't think many people know about, is it can actually reduce the quality of your sleep. Now, the reason for that is that when we're asleep, that's the time when we're most vulnerable to kind of attack, if that's going to happen in this modern world. But in deep sleep, if you've ever carried in a sleeping child and they're deep asleep, they're quite difficult to wake. And then in dream sleep, your muscles are paralyzed and to stop you from acting out dreams. So you're very vulnerable at night in those deeper stages and the dream stages of sleep. So if you go to bed a little bit overstimulated, a little bit stressed, what happens is our brains don't let us go into those deeper stages of sleep, which makes sleep less satisfying and also means that in the lighter stages of sleep, we're more aware of our surroundings. And because of that, sometimes what we perceive as being awake is actually the light stages of sleep. And we confuse those in our brains. So a whole combination of things means that if you kind of overstimulate your sympathetic nervous system before bed or think about sleep too much, you can then end up having a poor night's sleep. So overall, that's kind of what happened last night. But I thought it might be useful to talk through some of those things.
Yeah, for sure, for lots of different reasons. First of all, I'm sorry if I had any role in your interrupted sleep last night. That's not what I intend to do with guests. But I think lots of people can certainly relate to that. That kind of that stress sleep cycle of you getting yourself worked up about sleep, and so then you don't sleep well, and then the next day you're worked up, and it can carry on, can't it? And also, I think all of us have experienced that. Oh, well, I know I've got to get up early tomorrow. Perhaps you're going on holiday and you need to get to the airport for a certain time. I know that I always sleep terribly. I just can't help it, even though, you've set 3 alarms on your phone and 1 by the bed and all this stuff. You still will sleep terribly, won't you? And
that's a really classic example, actually. When you've set your alarm, you've got to get a flight and you just get rubbish sleep.
Yeah.
And you might only know that you've got 5 hours and pressure to sleep because you've got to get up early. And that's when you get the worst sleep. And for people with insomnia, that's kind of the experience that they have all the time.
Right, yeah. So getting into that cycle of stress, stress, worrying about sleep, and then not sleeping well. Yeah. Oh man, it's so tough. I thought the tip you gave about your husband and the kind of the partner that would go and comfort the children, that's really interesting. A nice little tip to start off with. I've never heard that before, so it makes sense
really
to me as well.
Useful. And I'm not the sort of baby sleep specialist, but know from my conversations about, particularly if your baby links sort of breastfeeding or milk feeds with going to sleep and associates it with mum. Sometimes if it's actually dad going in, they don't have that same association. So when dad goes in, they're not looking for milk, and then they're much more likely just to go back to sleep.
Yeah, it might just be a quick comfort, and then they are ready to go back to sleep. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. But all of that, how it plays into the kind of the anxiety around sleep, because I guess that now we're more aware of how important sleep is, which is great. We know more about the health benefits, the both physical health, mental health benefits of sleep. But then I suppose with that comes some anxiety around sleep. And I guess that's what you're speaking to. And is there anything else that you would say about that, like that balance of knowing how important sleep is, but not getting you so stressed about it? Like, for example, this morning you've woken up and you know that you haven't had a very good sleep, but generally you sleep well. I posted something on Instagram recently about some, steps I recommend to a good sleep, and I said in that, I sleep well probably 80 to 90% of the time, and from what I understand, that's okay and that's normal. Like, it's not that we are all going to be these super Zen sleepers every single night, like clockwork. It feels like, yes, you can have an interrupted night, and it's not the end of the world. Yes, it's not great. Yes, the next day you'll be feeling groggy and maybe not performing as well as you'd like to. But move on. Just set yourself up for the night that's coming up, and you're away again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, really important. And actually, there was a great study done looking at people who have a bad night, what the next night is likely to be like. Because everyone, even good sleepers, have a bad night now and then. And like, I had a bad night last night, but I know I'm going to be fine tonight, and I don't worry about it. And that's, you need to try and hold on to that. But this study said that if you have a bad night, your chances of having a good night the next night are 60%. And if you're unlucky enough to have 2 bad nights in a row, by your third night, it's a 90% chance of it being okay. And sometimes if you can just hold on to that, it's just a bad night, tomorrow will be fine, then that can be really helpful, because all you need to do is kind of diffuse that thought in your head of kind of anxiety and panic around sleep. And it has an incredible calming impact on the brain, which can really help you get off to sleep. And I think there's lots of, particularly at the moment, lots of information out there about the importance of sleep and how great sleep is. And yes, all of those things are true, but it isn't particularly helpful for those people who are struggling to sleep.
Yeah.
And for most people who are having difficulty sleeping, they've looked to see whether or not it has a detrimental impact on their overall health. And actually, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that they die sooner, die younger, have negative impacts except on their mental health, which is why it's so important if you are having sleep problems that are becoming a bit more ingrained and you're struggling to kind of break that cycle, to get help. And there's really, really good treatments where there's excellent success rates in breaking that cycle and teaching you those techniques, so that, yes, you might be more prone to having another bout of insomnia, but you know how to fix it and you know how to get yourself out of the patterns really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So act and do something about it, and don't let it become your new normal, I suppose, which is perhaps as a society we have, as I understand it, we're sleeping a lot less and not getting the quality of sleep that we used to get, I suppose, 100 years ago, when, we didn't have all these distractions and blue light and all that kind of thing. But yeah, recognize it. But don't let that become the new normal. Go out and seek help from, organizations such as yourself that you've set up.
I think there's 2 groups of people. There's some people who are just not getting enough sleep because sleep's sort of slipped down their priority list, or they're so stimulated by the world that they're living in that they no longer feel that sensation of tiredness or value sleep and rest. And they're a little bit different because they have no problem falling or staying asleep, but they might not be giving themselves enough sleep opportunities, so time in bed to get the sleep that they need. And then there's the other group where actually their difficulty is getting to sleep or staying asleep. And the 2, actually, their approaches are a little bit different. One's about making space for sleep, and the other one is trying to look at the root cause for why they're having problems and try to break some of those cycles that are leading to ongoing poor sleep.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense to me. And later on, I want to ask you about some of the kind of quick wins to improving sleep, I suppose, around habits and environment and things.
Yeah.
But before we get on to that, and before I ask you about just some of these benefits that we have touched upon, why sleep is so important, I've got to ask about, you were saying about getting worked up before you go to bed and feeling a bit stressed and anxious, and then that's preventing you from falling asleep. So is there, and I know this is a bit off the cuff, but is there one thing that you think has helped patients? Like, I don't know, is it meditation, or is it breath work, or is it journaling, or something like that? I see all of these types of tips for when someone is in a situation like that. They're lying in bed and they're ruminating, and then they can't switch off. Is there one thing that you would recommend, which I know is a very that's a bit specific, and there's individual cases, but I'm just curious. I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is it's really personal. For some people, breath work is great and really easy to access. For other people, there's a lovely thing called the body scan, which you can use, which is kind of a progressive relaxation of different parts of your body. For other people, it's about visualization, so walking through a park or imagining themselves making a recipe, or it's just about distracting the brain in whichever way you can that starts to switch it off. And you can almost feel it in your body where when you've got the right technique, you kind of get this kind of calm, almost sort of oozy feeling where suddenly it feels like everything is relaxing. And often you have to play around with different techniques. And the best time to practice is actually during the day. And we do know that the more you practice these techniques, the better you get at them. So the one that probably has the most evidence behind it is actually what's called sort of cyclical breathing, which is a kind of breath work technique where you breathe in for 4, hold for 6, and breathe out for 7. And you need to do that for about 5 minutes each day, and it reduces anxiety and has been shown to also improve sleep. And if you practice it during the day, it then means at the point when you're starting to have thoughts whirling around your head in the middle of the night, you can then start picking it back up again and go, okay, I'm going to return to the breathing. And the other thing that's really important is if you're starting to become frustrated and you're finding that sleep is just not happening, no matter which of these techniques you use, get out of bed and go somewhere else and do something else until you start feeling sleepy again. One of the problems when you're having sleep problems is your bed becomes this place where it's associated with not sleeping and tossing and turning. And actually those feelings of frustration are part of the problem. And so you have to, as soon as that first kind of sensation comes, you go, stop, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to sit somewhere quietly. It can even be a chair by the side of the bed, and do something else. And then when you feel really sleepy, try again. And it's all about relearning the technique of going to sleep without that kind of frustration and not trying anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think I've heard Dr. Matthew Walker say you wouldn't sit at the dinner table waiting to get hungry. So don't lie in bed waiting to get sleepy. I think it's and it's something that I've used in the past as well on those nights where it's just not happening. Give it, I don't know, I think I've given it 20 minutes, half an hour, sometimes even longer, because you're like wrestling with it. Then you think, right, no, come on, this isn't happening. Get out of bed, go to the living room, maybe read, but maybe I'd put on something, I might put on a comedy or something like that. And yes, not ideal with a screen, but I think actually in that kind of situation, I'm just watching something that's switching my mind off and starting to feel a bit calmer, and then try again, so to speak.
Absolutely. And it's not meant to be a time of punishment. Actually, go and do something that you like doing. Watch TV. There's good evidence that the blue light in screens and technology doesn't inhibit sleep. It can be that it's a bit sort of addictive in that you keep on scrolling, but actually there's some really good new evidence that the blue light in screens don't stop you from sleeping. So if you want to watch a series, that's absolutely fine. And often, sometimes the series is quite nice because you can get a short episode, maybe 30 minutes. You watch one and you go, at the end of 30 minutes, I'm going to go back to bed. And by then you're feeling nice and sleepy and calm. And as long as it's not something too kind of either addictive or kind of stimulating. Exactly.
It might not be a good idea.
It can be great. Or bake some cookies or organize your sock drawer, whatever you want to do. But don't pick up your work laptop, and don't do anything that's going to make you more stressed or anxious. So sort of checking emails or social media sometimes can be really stimulating. So probably avoid those things.
So what you say about the blue light, doesn't that fly in the face of everything that we've heard in the past 5 years, where it's blue light, you've got to get some blue light blockers, you've got to change the settings on your whatever screens you're watching to stop it. So I'm interested to hear more about that. But at the same time, what you said about watching something addictive or kind of stimulating, I have heard more things around that recently. Yeah, that it's not the fact that it's not the blue light from the screens that people are watching in bed. It's the fact that they're scrolling through a TikTok video like once every 3 seconds and going like that. And of course, then you're not calming down and getting into that rest and digest mode. You're more in the flight or fight because you're being stimulated by all these images and videos. Yeah, interesting. That's the first I've heard that, actually blue light might not be as detrimental as we've been told.
Yeah, there's been some really good studies, and
Okay.
a lot of the work has been led by Michael Gradisar in Australia, looking at the impact of blue light on sleep. And actually, I think even Matthew Walker has sort of come around to the idea that blue light is really not as impactful on our sleep as lots of people said, but it is that kind of addictive thing where it's called bedtime procrastination, where you just keep on watching more, one more video, and it's really difficult. They're designed to be addictive.
Yeah, we've all been there. I've been sat on the sofa and I realise an hour has passed and all I've been doing is scrolling through Instagram reels. And I'm like, Sam, what have you just done with an hour of your evening? But that's, like you said, that's how they're designed, isn't it? Okay. I'd like to move on to a bit of a practical kind of scenario that involves two of my friends, if that's okay. So two of my friends have got 2 children, and their youngest is, I hope I don't get this wrong, I'm fairly sure she's 2 years old, almost 3. But she's going through a period of very interrupted sleep at the moment. So my friends say that she's waking up about every 2 hours. So she does get flare-ups with her eczema, and I think that has been bad recently. But at the same time, my friend did say, well, he doesn't think it's so much that. He thinks it's more of a comfort thing, because actually when they go and collect her from her bedroom and take her into their bed and kind of comfort her, she does settle down quite quickly and will get back to sleep. So they're thinking, well, it can't be the eczema, because all they're doing is holding her and comforting her to get back to sleep. But with that being the case, that she's waking up every couple of hours, obviously their sleep is really suffering because of that. I'm just wondering what you would say to a couple in a situation like this, and I am kind of particularly interested in what you'd say to my 2 friends, to the mum and dad that are losing a lot of sleep at the moment and kind of going through a really difficult period. What would a sleep consultant say to them about their mindset, their approach to the evenings and the mornings and the day? Just anything that you could offer, I'd be really grateful, and I'd like to think they would as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be really difficult when you have little ones who just need comfort during the night. And if they're having a flare up and something physical that's causing the problem, then you've got to be there for them. And so you're almost in that survival mode as parents. You just got to get through, and they'll be sleep deprived. And so they're going to need to figure out ways to get some sleep back into their lives. And whether that's going to bed a bit early or having a nap during the afternoon, they need to get some downtime to rest and rejuvenate, because you can't go long term with sleep deprivation and not suffer the effects of it. But I guess also from the perspective with this child, I've got a couple ideas of things that might make a difference.
Yeah, great.
Because it sounds like maybe, as you said, that it's a little bit more than the eczema, and maybe she's ended up in a little bit of a pattern, and there's nowhere nicer for a child than the parents' bed. And once they've kind of discovered that if they call out in the night, they get to go into lovely mummy's, cuddly mummy and daddy's bed, sometimes that's what they want more than anything. And so one potential solution would be actually to swap the problem around a little bit and go into her room and sleep with her, so on a mattress on the floor or next to her or whatever it is, for a few nights until her sleep has settled back into a pattern. And then at that point, slowly withdraw the sort of support. So at first, they might have the mattress next to her, then a little bit further away, then out in the hallway, and then back in their own bedroom. And what that does is the parents are able to get a little bit better quality sleep because they're nearby, and a comfort may just be putting out a hand or saying shh or whatever's needed, and then reestablishes her sleeping patterns, and then slowly withdraws that support. And then if possible, if kind of there's a time when she wakes up again in the future, once she's reestablished her good sleep patterns, going in to be with her rather than take her back to the bed can be really effective. And the other thing too, often, this is more from our pediatric sleep expert, but we work very closely together. But often at 2, they're still having naps, but their naps might be a little bit too long. So sometimes just looking to shorten the nap slightly might mean that she's a little bit more sleepy in the evening time, and then she falls into the deeper quality sleep. And if you're in the good quality sleep, you're much less likely to wake up and then go, oh, I need comfort to get back to sleep.
Interesting. Great. Yeah, I'll certainly share that with them, and I'll let you know if they have any success, which I'm hoping that they do. You said about in terms of the parents, them getting to bed earlier, and I think my friend said to me the other night, Sam, we're going to bed at like 7:30 at the moment, so I really feel for them. What a time it must be to kind of like be losing some of your evenings and then going through that disturbed sleep. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but as long as the eczema's under good control, and sometimes it's worth going back to the doctor to make sure it is in the kind of treated as well as you can. For most little ones, even if there's skin things or other things happening, it is possible to get them sleeping well again. And that's so important because the parents, sleep deprivation for parents is very real.
Very real, yes, yeah. I've got 3 sisters and a brother, 12 nieces and nephews. So yes, I've seen how real it is for sure. Well, not firsthand yet. We'll see. Right. Perhaps we can move on to some more general approaches then. You've already shared some excellent tips on kind of choosing from that menu of approaches if you're in bed and you're struggling to sleep, whether it's breath work or meditation or body scans, which I really like. But what else? What about kind of 3 or 5 quick wins that just anybody could pick up and try that might well improve their sleep?
Sure. My number one is get up at the same time every single day. Now, the reason that's important is that our circadian rhythm, our internal body clock, which is within every cell in our body and sets the timer on when all our hormones are released and how our sleep functions and how much of different types of sleep we have overnight so that it exactly fits what your body needs, can't shift more than half an hour per night. And so if you're going to bed, for example, 2 hours later than you normally do and sleeping in 2 hours later, all the hormones that are released are happening at just the wrong time. And if they happen at the wrong time during your cycle, they don't have as many benefits. Also, if you're someone who's a poor sleeper, having the support of your kind of regular circadian rhythm can be really helpful. And if you've had a really rubbish night's sleep and you still get up at the same time, what it will mean is you're feeling a little bit more sleepy, a little bit more sleep pressure when you go to sleep at night. And hopefully that will kind of help you feel sleepy enough to sleep through the night without too many interruptions. So that's the most important one in my view. Get up at the same time and ideally go to bed at the same time. And I'm not a complete party pooper. If you want to go out and have a good night out, that's fine. But don't do it too often. And often a sort of sneaky nap before sleep loss can be quite good. So go to bed for an hour, have a nap, and then go out so that you can still set your alarm for the same time each day.
Yeah. And this is called social jet lag, isn't it? So
Yes,
over the weekend, so people are staying up earlier, getting up later, and then on Monday wondering why, when they try and wake up, they're feeling awful. And I think I've heard people compare it to, well, if you'd have caught a plane to China or something over the weekend, maybe not that extreme, but it's kind of you've shifted your body clock that much in those 2 nights and 2 mornings, that of course then you're going to be waking up on Monday and it's going to be difficult. Is that an exaggeration, or is that kind of what's going on?
That's absolutely true. And there's some really good studies looking at the detrimental impact of shifting your clock too much, that it can make you more prone to cancer and heart disease and more prone to infections. It can really impact your mood. And even though it kind of feels natural, I'll sleep in a little bit more at the weekends, I'll feel great. Overall, actually, you will feel much better in yourself if you wake up at the same time every day. Maybe an extra half an hour at the weekends if you need it.
If you're feeling crazy.
But actually, sticking to the same time is really important, because when we're in sync with our body clocks, we feel our best. It's really interesting. There's lots of experiments where people go and lock themselves in caves to try and synchronize themselves with their body clock. And this originally sort of happened. There was a French man who did 60 days back in, I think, 62. And his sleep was perfect because he was completely in sync. And there was one recently who I think was 600 days, so completely missed COVID. And she didn't want to come out of the cave.
This Spanish lady, wasn't it? Yeah, was she from Spain? Is that right? Yeah.
I think that's right. And because she felt so good, we feel at our best when we're absolutely in sync with our bodies. And so when we're trying to kind of shift from kind of different time zones, as anyone who's ever kind of done a long haul flight, you feel rubbish. Yeah. And what you're doing when you're sort of sleeping in for extra 2 hours and then trying to shift back a couple of days later is you're kind of pushing your body into that jet lag state, and it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't at all. Right. So another 4 maybe, or even another couple, I'll leave that up to you, but.
So my next one would be exercise. Exercise is great for sleep. Anyone who's kind of run a marathon or even kind of spent the day at the beach or whatever, it is really good at increasing your deep sleep and helping you get to sleep faster. But it doesn't need to be a marathon. It doesn't need to be strenuous exercise. Actually, the most important thing is consistency. So doing a little bit every day, whether that's a walk or a stretch or yoga or whatever you want to do, but doing it every day has a really positive impact on your sleep. The third one I would say is having a bedtime routine. We do it for our kids, but actually, because we know that it works, you dim the lights, you do the hot bath, you do the story, and it works really well for children. But actually, it also works really well for adults. And it's all about, as you say, Sam, that kind of winding down of your sympathetic nervous system, switching into the parasympathetic state. Our bodies love routine. And so if you sort of set an alarm on your clock for this is when I'm going to begin my wind down routine, you then find the things that you like doing and include those. Maybe have sort of a ritual. You sit in your favorite chair, you read a book, you put your blanket on in your PJs, whatever it is. And so you're preparing your body for sleep. That can really help. And then I think number 4 would be alcohol. I'm going to sound like a complete party people in all senses, but actually alcohol is really detrimental to your sleep. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, it makes your sleep more broken. So you're much more likely to wake up lots of times during the night. But also you find that you don't get into the same sort of sleep cycles, and you have less refreshing sleep. And even though it does work as a sedative, and anyone who's had too many gin and tonics knows you feel very sleepy and you might sort of pass out, whatever it is, and it has a sedative effect in the early parts. Over the rest of the night, actually, it reduces your sleep quality. And the other thing it does, which is very important, is it suppresses your dreams. So you get much less dream sleep. And dream sleep is really important for our sort of creative thinking. It's when all the parts of our brain are linked together. It's also when we store our memories and separate the kind of memory part with the emotion. So, for example, if you get step out in the road and get hit by a car, you'll be able to learn from the experience and know that it's not good to step out in the road without looking. But the kind of physical pain of the impact is then separated from the memory, so that when you think back on that, you're able to learn from it without the kind of painful recollections. And when that part doesn't work so well, you're more prone to things like post-traumatic stress, but also anxiety, depression, other things. So dream sleep is really important for our emotional well-being.
Interesting. And you're echoing completely what a previous guest on the show has said, which is that was James Hewitt, who's a human performance scientist. And I asked him this very question because we just so happened to get onto the topic of sleep, and then spent about half of our conversation on sleep, actually, I think, but kind of on different topics. We also talked about caffeine and different things, and that caffeine's effects on sleep. But I had to ask him the question about alcohol, and pose it to him that there are many people out there, aren't there, that say, well, it's a nightcap and I need it to unwind and relax. And you've completely backed up exactly what he said about how that might not be a choice that is for your best interests if you want to improve your sleep and perform well the next day in how it interrupts sleep and affects the REM cycle as well. So thank you for sharing that again, and thank you for sharing all the other tips around movement and routines. And yeah, it's really valuable. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So a final question. I would like to ask about supplements. I don't know if this is something that you recommend, if they work, the research behind them. Do supplements play a role in sleep? And if so, which ones? Anything you'd like to explain to me about supplements would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get asked this a lot because when you have a sleep problem, you just search around for anything that's going to fix it. And there are some supplements that do make a difference. The impact is relatively small,
right.
But I'll go through the ones that are helpful. And I guess one other thing I just want to add is that for people who are having sleep problems, by the time they get to see me, they've normally tried the exercise, they've cut out caffeine, they've cut out alcohol, they've normally done all the lifestyle things. And often, if you've got kind of an ingrained sleep problem, actually, it's not a quick fix. It's a little bit more in depth. The best therapy is what's called CBTI, so cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's different than what's used for anxiety, depression. It's much more about giving people tools and techniques and retraining their sleep so that they can achieve good sleep. And it's normally done over sort of 4 to 6 weeks. So often solutions for sleep, if it's become ingrained, are a little bit more complex and it's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
But if it's a more sort of mild sleep problem, then supplements can help and do have quite a good role. So the first one probably is melatonin. So melatonin has good evidence in kids and those over 55 that it can help with particularly sleep onset, so falling asleep, and can improve sleep overnight. So for over 55s, you get about an extra 21 minutes per night of extra sleep if you use melatonin, which is pretty good over a week. And you probably fall asleep about sort of 8 to 10 minutes faster. So that one works. It's not available over the counter in the UK, though in other countries it's classed as a food supplement. And so you can buy it over the counter, for example, in Spain and the United States. But just be aware that the doses sometimes are a little bit variable. But melatonin definitely does have a role, and sometimes just having something that you take and that helps you stop worrying about sleep can be really helpful. The evidence is a little bit more mixed between childhood and 55, but often with studies, they kind of throw everyone together in a big group and it doesn't look at the individual. And so it might be worth something worth trying. The second one is magnesium. Magnesium available from health food stores, again, can help with sleep and is worth a try. Then kind of the old-fashioned things would include valerian root, chamomile and lavender, all of those do have evidence to support the kind of onset of sleep and calming, and some of that may be linked to that sort of ritual of calming down, ready for bed. And the fourth one is tart cherries, which you can buy tart cherry juice again from the pharmacies, and can help with sleep. The evidence isn't huge to support it, but it's one to try, and it certainly won't do you any harm.
No, of course not. Interesting. I've only heard of cherries being good for kind of an anti-inflammatory effect, like post-exercise. I've heard eating cherries is a good thing to do. I've never heard of that association with sleep.
Yes, it is. My understanding is that it helps in the production of melatonin.
Right.
So it then increases the melatonin in the system.
Interesting. And going back to melatonin, I've heard that in teenagers that it might not be the best choice, and that there can be some, did I hear kind of interruption to hormones and things like that? It can be a bit disruptive. Is that wrong? Do you know anything about that? And no worries if not. I'm just thought I'd ask the question while it was in my head.
So with teenagers, the theory behind it, there haven't been any long-term studies regarding melatonin and its safety. It's used really commonly, particularly in little ones with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, and can be really, really helpful. And but there's a theory that it might impact puberty. It's at the moment more of a theory rather than any strong evidence. And for that reason, people tend not to recommend taking it for more than 4 weeks, except by specialist advice. But teenagers are actually a really interesting one, because a lot of the time it's not so much a sleep problem as such. It's more that their circadian rhythm tends to shift when they reach their teenage years. And this seems to be just a genetic thing that happens in your teens. And so they instinctively want to stay up late till kind of 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And they just don't want to get out of bed in the morning, because at 7 o'clock when their alarm goes off, it's equivalent to 2, 3 in the morning for us. And if anyone tried to get us up, then we would tell them to leave us alone. And so sometimes it's actually about circadian rhythms. And for those, actually, there's different treatments, mainly around trying to shift their circadian rhythm. And that would be for a period of time using melatonin, light therapy, and exercise. And sometimes you can get pretty good results. Very good results at shifting them, but you need the teenager to be motivated, which sometimes is the main problem.
It's hard in teenagers, exactly. But that's also interesting. Yeah, they've had this shift in their circadian rhythm, and we're saying, no, you've got to get up to be at school and be sitting down at a desk and wide awake at 8 in the morning. And it's, from what I understand, like biologically speaking, that's just so difficult for them, and that is an unrealistic expectation. Is that there seems to be an argument for pushing school back later, doesn't there, in secondary schools? Starting
absolutely.
it later and letting it go on later.
And there's really good evidence that when they do it, that academically they perform better, they engage more, they enjoy the school experience better. And in the UK, the start times are not too bad. I mean, they could go back a little bit, particularly in those teenage years, but in the States, often they're starting at sort of 7 in the morning. And for a teenager, that's really tough.
Yeah.
And so each of us have a kind of natural tendency towards being an early bird or a night owl, and that's set by our circadian rhythm and how long it takes for each of our cells to do 24 hours on the clock. But it's not 24 hours for everyone. Most people, it's a little bit more than 24 hours, which means we have a tendency towards being a night owl. And for teenagers, if they also have a tendency to be a night owl, then they get pushed back. For some of them, it's much, much more difficult. And so if you have kids that are really not engaging, sometimes it's worth having a conversation about kind of what's going on. Do they sleep in till 3 o'clock in the afternoon at weekends? Because they may have shifted their circadian rhythm, and just that pushing it back can make a difference.
Right. Addressing that. Yeah. That's great. Thank you for sharing about the supplements as well. But if I understand correctly, you're saying kind of those lifestyle approaches first. Those are your kind of first ports of call in terms of the regular routine and and that kind of thing. Sunlight in the morning, is that right?
Yes, sunlight,
Okay.
and actually that's another big one. Sunlight in the morning, really, really important. And I think if I added that onto the list, it would be number 5 or maybe even a little bit higher, because actually it's great for switching off your melatonin production. So the sleepy hormone overnight, giving you a boost of all the kind of cortisol and your endorphins and everything, making you feel good, your serotonin, and it's great for mood. But also it's great for locking in your circadian rhythm. So that bright light helps us to keep our clock running at exactly 24 hours.
Yeah. And I think you can always notice the effects of that when you haven't done it. If there's a day when I've kind of had a bit more of a lie-in and then I don't go outside straight away, I stay in and maybe just watch a bit of TV, maybe catching up on some football or something like that, and then eventually don't get out until 12 or 1, and then it's cloudy as well. I feel like that's normally associated with me struggling to sleep that night and just not feeling great either, not feeling very energetic and alive. Whereas the days where I wake up and I know it's sunny, so I'm going, right, I'm going to go straight outside, maybe do a bit of skipping in the park or something like that. On the spot, by the way. I'm not like skipping around. I'd like to think I look more like a boxer than a 7-year-old. But anyway, that I always feel better when I do that, which of course isn't possible in different situations. Completely understand that, but when possible, do it, I think.
And I think it's important, even on a cloudy day, you get loads more sort of melatonin effect with it switching off, and get more impact from natural light than you do from indoor light. And so even on a cloudy day, you'll get plenty of kind of that good effect. So walk around, go outside, get off the bus, stop early on your way to work. Try and just find ways of being outdoors for just 10 minutes in the morning if you possibly can.
Yeah. And if you're doubting that, then just get one of those light meters on your phone, can't you? Measure the light inside, even in a really brightly lit room like I'm in now with the kind of the lights shining on because we're recording a video, and then compare that to going outside now. It's raining now, but I know that the number would be much higher. What is it? The lux? LUX, is that right?
Yeah. The lux.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right that the difference is incredible. Because you'll be inside with bright lights and you'll be like, they're kind of 10, 50. You go outside and it's completely different in the thousands.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Caitlin, thank you so much for breaking down so many aspects of sleep, talking about things that people can try. I'm sure there are things in there that people haven't tried yet, and even so, hopefully it gives people some inspiration if they are struggling to sleep at the moment. That there's help out there, and there are little tweaks that we can make to our day to help us sleep better. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I ask every guest, and then I won't let you go until you tell me where people can connect with you and your website and things like that. So don't let me forget, because I did forget with the last guest to ask him. So I won't do that this time. First question is, what is the first question? Oh yeah, what's that one lesson you wish you'd have been taught when you were a child?
So I think for me, I had a wonderful childhood where I had a really good grounding in lots of things like exercise and being outdoors and nutrition, but we were quite a frenetic family, always on, always busy, always kind of trying to work towards goals and achieve and kind of active. And I think I found I had to learn to give myself time to rest and time to unwind and time for silence. And I'm a middle child. And so there was never a moment when it was quiet. And I was quite almost uncomfortable in silence for a long time. And I think our brains actually need a little bit of time of quiet to process and be in our own headspace and learn how to feel comfortable there. And I think if there was one thing I'd change would be a little bit of time that as a family or individually where that self-care and quiet and rest was made part of our kind of waking normal day, rather than just something that we did when we were shattered at the end of the day.
And what's one habit I could add to my life to help me feel great?
I think probably I would say that the breath work, that just 5-minute exercise, because I think all of us can find 5 minutes. We struggle probably to find an hour to go to a class, but just having 5 minutes in our lives to do some breathing. And it's amazing. Almost as you start, you can feel your body just switching into this new mode. And the more you do it, the better it feels. And the first few times it takes kind of maybe the full 5 minutes before it starts, but then suddenly your body learns, this is my time to switch and relax.
And finally, if you could buy everyone in the world one book, which book would you buy them?
This is a tough question, because I tend to read fiction more, but the one that actually really speaks to me and I've really enjoyed that's non-fiction is some cartoon poems by sort of philosopher and poet called Michael Lunig, who's from Australia. Okay. And it's called the Curly Pajama Diaries. And it's about these two friends, Vasco Pajama and Mr. Curly, who are long lost friends who talk to each other in letters about all the wonderful things in life. And it talks about rest and switching off and busyness of our modern world. And it's lovely because it gives you little lessons that you can take away, which are funny and engaging and so, so important. I particularly like the one about rest and sleep.
Of course. Fantastic. Right. People that want to connect with you, where can they find you? And tell us about your website as well, and where people can go to find out more about the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called The Sleep Project, and you can find us at thesleepproject.life. And on there, we've got loads of free information and downloads and blogs all about sleep, to try and help anyone who's having sleep problems. And we help people from the littlest babies to people as they get older and through every change during your life, including sort of menopause, transition, and all those times when our sleep can become more challenging. And from there, you can link into LinkedIn, and we've got an Instagram with lots more videos and advice that people can use. We also do bespoke programs with kind of one-on-one, as well as we're about to come out with some online programs for insomnia to help people guide themselves through it with additional support. So come and check us out.
Brilliant. Right. Really appreciate your time, Caitlin. And yeah, I'm looking forward to staying in touch and to getting this episode out there.
Fantastic. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. I really hope you found my conversation with Caitlin insightful. If you did enjoy the episode, please share it with friends, family, and colleagues who you think would find it helpful. You can, of course, also support the podcast by following and rating the show on whichever app you're listening on. Thank you very much again, and I'm looking forward to bringing you another episode very soon.